Hey everyone, Michael Simpkins here. Welcome to episode 5 of the Police Instructors Podcast. Thanks again for joining me here today. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. This podcast takes you on a journey with police officers, police instructors, and other industry experts to provide information on training trends, officer stories, and more. In this episode, I'm speaking with Danny Aloy, a good friend of mine who has an incredible story to share. Danny retired from law enforcement after serving 19 years at local agencies in both Tennessee and Florida. Make sure you pay attention because Danny's going to share an incident that occurred in Santa Rosa County, Florida on July 22nd, 2004 that changed his life forever. Make sure to pay attention all the way through and I'll meet up with you at the end.
Bringing police instructors together, discussing training trends and more. Welcome to the Police Instructors Podcast, where industry training experts share their strategies on how to plan, develop, and design courses in a way that facilitates training retention. Bringing his 23 years of expertise as a police instructor to you, please welcome your host, Michael Simpkins.
Thank you for being here with me today, Danny. Man, I'm extremely excited you're here. Welcome to the Police Instructors Podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Nice being with you.
Well, man, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you so you can share your story with other officers listening. But before we do, I just wanted to say again, I really appreciate your willingness to share. So go ahead, man.
It was July 22nd, 2004, about 5:50 in the morning. I was working a midnight shift, and as the midnight shift guys know, you don't really want to do anything the last hour or so because you don't want to get left into overtime or cut into overtime. And the agencies back then were frowning upon officers staying over. It wasn't something you wanted to do. So I had a supervisor from another district drive by me, and he took me on to an alternate channel and said morning and everything and went on his way. And next thing I know, he called me on the radio again and said, "Hey, you got 2 dirt bikes. They're coming your way. They're heading westbound." So I told him I'd look into it. So I was sitting there and I first heard the motorcycles because they were open mufflers or what have you, as they approached. And I saw them come by. One was in the fast lane, the other one was in the slower lane, and he was swerving pretty badly. So I know I had a feeling he was intoxicated or what have you. So I pulled out, and we traveled approximately 2 blocks. I didn't get a chance to get on the radio because the oncoming shift was checking in with dispatch, letting them know that they were coming on. So I got behind them, and I saw one of them make a right-hand turn behind this bar, and then I saw the other one make a turn. So I turned right before the bar, and the one motorcycle came out and went straight, which would be north and in that direction. And the other one didn't come out. So I stopped behind the bar, and I caught a glimpse of that guy trying to kickstart his motorcycle. At that point, I was able to get on the radio and notify dispatch of my location and a quick brief as to what was happening. And I got out with the driver or the rider of that motorcycle and asked him to get off his bike. He got off his bike, and I asked him to lay down. So he lay down and I had him out prone. The other motorcycle I no longer saw or heard. So I had a good idea that he was stopped, either watching us or he had turned his motorcycle off or what have you, but he was nearby because I didn't hear him continuing on the roadway or the sidewalks or wherever he was riding on. So I unholstered my taser and I put the dot on purpose on the ground, right next to where he was laying so he could see it. And I gave commands to turn his head. I had it prone out. Like I said, he turned his head away from me, and I had him spread out. Still bearing in mind that the other bike was in the area, and not knowing where he was at, I approached. They went to handcuff him. And as I did, the next 3 minutes are kind of like photo snapshots of what happened, and it's what I remember are little glimpses of pictures of what happened. He got up from the ground. I remember that part, and he punched me. And the fight was on. We were struggling for the next 3 minutes in a fight with knowing again still that the other guy was in the area. So I remember a time where I was on my hands and knees fighting this guy, and he was standing over me, punching me in the head. I had just gotten a fresh haircut, so I remember I used to like high and tight. So my scalp, not my scalp, but the sides of my head were pretty short cut. The blows were pretty significant. I didn't feel pain, but you could feel the movement of my head with when he struck were very strong. He stood over me while I was on my hands and knees. I remember reaching down to my shirt where I kept my mic and calling out signal 36 or signal 13, I'm sorry, which meant officer in trouble. I later found out that radio transmission didn't come across. I remember at that time I did an open palm strike to his groin area, and it didn't affect him. I did another palm strike just to get him off of me or what have you, and that didn't work either. So next thing I remember is hearing him say, get his bleeping ass. And at that point I was standing up, and the next thing I know, I was on my back this time, and there were two of them. Apparently the guy who had left came back. One of them started kicking me on my head, and I started to fade out. I can remember feeling getting tunnel vision really bad, and feeling really weak. So as my last resort or what have you, I rolled onto my left hip while on my back and unholstered, and from my hip I took 2 shots, not knowing where they would hit. And I don't remember hearing the report of the weapon. I don't remember hearing much of anything during the fight. Only that, like I said, that flashback or photo of him saying, kick his bleeping, or get his bleeping ass or what have you. So next thing I know, I remember seeing red. For some reason, I remember seeing the color red a lot for the next couple of flashes. And I remember the guy who initiated the attack saying, you shot my bleeping brother. And I remember saying to him, I did, and I'm going to shoot you next if you don't stop, or something of that nature. So I remember him holding my wrist of my weapon hand, and preventing me from pointing it to him or pointing it at him. We struggled for what appeared to last for minutes. The next thing I remember is me on my back and him over me holding my right wrist, which still had the handgun in it. And with his left hand, he was choking me. The next thing I remember is a flash, which I remember as being like a lightning bolt. So I'm assuming that was a taser that was deployed on him from my first backup that arrived. The taser had no effect on him. So then I remember hearing two loud thumps, which I later discovered were an asp that the first responder who got there used on him, and hit him in the base of the neck 2 times, at which point he knocked him out and was unconscious. The next thing I remember was peace and quiet, and me telling the first officer that responded that I couldn't get him off of me. I couldn't get him off of me. I said that several times to him.
Yeah.
The first responders arrived on scene. They put me in a helicopter, life flight helicopter, with the one that I shot, and they took me to the hospital, where I spent the next 2 days with a severe concussion, traumatic brain injury. My head was the size of a pumpkin, of course, all black and blue and bloody from the strikes that I had sustained from the attack. All of the injuries were from my neck to the top of my head, and that's basically it. The 2 suspects served 6 years in prison and are currently out and about doing their thing. And that'd be it, Mike.
You mentioned in there that incident lasted 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a long time to have to fight for your life. Was that the total time of the entire incident?
The 3 minutes were the length of the entire, from the moment I stopped them, or I didn't stop them. I just found him one behind the bar. From that time to when the first responding officer, which was the supervisor from the other district who had told me about the motorcycles, arrived on scene.
You mentioned that first radio transmission didn't go out for whatever reason. Were you able to ever get a radio transmission out, or did the first responding officer on scene just turn around to come and check on you?
But Mike, the officer that arrived on scene, the initial officer that arrived, he's the one that called dispatch and told them that there was something wrong, because they were trying to get a hold of me on the radio, and I wasn't responding. So he told the dispatchers to clear the channel and make an emergency situation, more or less.
Yeah. Man, yeah, you said you were in the hospital for 3 days, right? Or was it longer than that?
3 days, Mike.
Yeah. Silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How long did it take you to recover enough to where you could go back to work?
Well, this happened in July, and I volunteered to return when Hurricane Ivan hit our area, and I knew my guys and my guys I work with were working 12-hour shifts, so I volunteered to come back early and help out with the hurricane recovery.
When was that?
So that was sometime, I think it was September. I can't remember the exact time. I think it was September.
Yeah,
in that time frame.
September. So you were off several months after that, but you feel like you went back to work early though because of the hurricane. Right.
I did, and but I don't regret it, because well, you know how you are, man. When you're the guys you work with, and you rely on are struggling. I mean, their homes were also affected with the hurricane.